Hey everybody, it's Garrett Allen Auto Customs. This is Project Shitbox Episode 2, and today we're going to talk about putting in some floor pans and some body mounts and getting some of this restoration taken care of. We're going to talk a little bit about the tools. We're going to talk about what kind of a welder I suggest you use, and some of the fitting and actually placing the floor pan in before welding is really what's essential to getting this thing done right, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So if you haven't seen this is the second episode of Project Shitbox. If you missed it, it's a 1977 Ford F-150 four-wheel drive. We took this thing off of Facebook Marketplace for $1,500, and it's a textbook example of a Midwest shitbox Ford. This thing came in, it was running and driving, but it was running and driving. It had holes in both sides of the floor pans. The whole back of the cab's rusted out. There's huge holes in the bed. It had a marine gas tank hog-tied with paracord in the bed with the fuel line run up the frame rail, also paracorded. It's a true testament to what these straight six Fords are capable of and how reliable and the longevity of them. It's insane. This truck's falling apart around it, and it's just ticking on down the road. I took it on a couple cruises very carefully before we tore it down just to see that it was good to drive, and man, this thing cruises right on down the road. And so stick around and see. All right, so we're over here on the other side of the shop now at the welding bench, and we got some of the tools that are required to do a repair like this. This is no big bad hot rod shop, man. This is literally a wash bay and an air compressor, a welder, and some tools and stuff that these people, at home could do, no problem. As long as you got some of this basic stuff. If you could get the interior and the truck into the position where it could be restored, you likely have most of the tools that you're going to need. But anyway, to drill out a lot of the spot welds, you got to drill them out. This is just a standard drill bit. I bought one of the Harbor Freight spot weld drill bits, and it literally drilled out 2 spot welds, and it was completely just toast. They're not worth buying. Just use a normal drill bit, drill straight through those welds, get those panels separated. Once you drill through them, sometimes you need a little something to get in there, cut some access metal. This is a body saw. This is a pretty nice body saw. It's cordless, Snap-on, name brand. There's a lot of options available. What you want though is this blade. This blade is what is going to help you do what you need to do when you're trying to work with panels like this. It's a very small blade. It still has the same chuck as a normal Sawzall blade, but it has a very, very precise blade. So that is a very important tool that is not exactly common. They're made in battery powered. You can also get them in air at Harbor Freight. I'm sure they've got them cheap. That's the route I would go. Then on to the next tool. Basically, we got a couple angle grinders. This one has wire wheel. You got to get some rust out of the way. You got to get some sealer out of the way. You need an angle grinder with a wire brush. It can be a die grinder. This is my die grinder right now. I've got the carbide bit on it, and this is the angle grinder for the 2-inch disc. I suggest using a pretty small disc. They come in 3. I use 2-inch. It's my favorite. Yeah, they're expensive. Yeah, they're small. Yeah, you go through them, but they're precise, and they don't eat out of the metal that you need to work with. You can get exactly where you're going. And on that topic, we have this tool, which is called a weld buster. It's essentially a 2 or 3 inch cutoff wheel, but it's thick. As you can see, it's not like a cutoff wheel that's really thin. This thing right here stays on top of the weld. On a butt weld like this, you'll have a little bit of a hump there, and this is how you're going to get that thing flat. It's a weld buster. You can find them where any cutoff wheels are. Just check out the thicknesses. This one's about twice as thick. You can get them a bit thicker than that too. So that's definitely a must-have if you want to finish your welds. If you don't want to finish your welds, if this is just some shit box like this, then you don't need that tool. You can use your 2-inch. But when you use a 2-inch wheel, it tends to hit the metal on both sides of your weld, and then when you go to weld again, your weld will blow out every time. So you want to stay on top of that weld, get that thing flattened out. simple other little tools, just some hand snips, nothing major, but when you're working in here, you're gonna find that these are very handy, taking apart the old sheet metal when you're drilling out, you're drilling out your spot welds. It's nice to come in there and clip some of that metal out of the way, get that little air saw in there, get this real small sawzall blade, get those welds cut all the way, and those panels come apart so you don't bend the panel underneath the one that you're trying to take off. And we got air sprayer, some sheet metal screws, and these right here are butt weld clamps. I picked these up at Harbor Freight. It's like $7 for a package of them. They are really cool. Basically, you slide the metal in here and there, and you tighten the wing nut, and it'll hold your panel in place. That's great for fitting it. The reason we have screws is because typically when you do a floor pan or the lower post or a cab corner, you're gonna pick somewhere to take a sheet metal screw, a real small sheet metal screw, and you're gonna drill it through to the panel that you're attaching it to. And what that's gonna do is while you're fitting, you're test fitting, every time you come in, you got that screw, you put that in there every time. That locates your panel where it needs to be for all the adjustments that you're gonna make to get a nice butt weld. So now take a look at the finished side on the passenger side, and then we're gonna go into some time lapses of cutting out. So on the front of the truck, before you make any cuts on these body mounts, what you wanna do is you wanna get your tape measure out and something along the lines of a level, and you need to record where the center of your body mount is. The center of the hole for the body mount is what is important. This shape right here on the replacement is not the same. So the only way to properly do that is to get in here with your tape measure and center your tape measure and come out with a level. You can use all kinds of different stuff. I use the inside of the pinch weld and you measure. And this side's different than the other side. But basically you want to find the center line of your bolt hole to here, and then you're going to record that number. And don't lose it. And I don't think it has to be 100% precise. It's about 9.5 inches between the inside of this pinch weld to the center line of that body mount. And on the passenger side, it was a lot like that. This is another tool that I use right here. It's a crayon. All we're gonna do is we're gonna take this crayon and we're gonna come up to the firewall. We're gonna 9.5. And we're gonna know when we set this up with our clamps and stuff, after we have our floor pan in, we'll measure out our center of our body mount, and it'll be 9.5 inches is where we're going to set it at. So that's a very important step to do. Another step that we would do with this crayon is there's a hole through the floor pan for the steering shaft. Right here, as you can see, I set it up in the truck, and I just from the bottom of the truck circled where the steering shaft's going to go. You could cut this out a bunch of different ways, but basically I'm going to use a hole saw. We're just going to punch that hole right there. There's also the e-brake cable in the factory location is somewhere about right here. It doesn't have to be precise. The one from the factory is real large oval like that. We're not going to do that. We know we can do that after the fact. The one that we do need and we want for sure is going to be the steering shaft hole. So those are two things that you want to touch base on before you get the saws out, just to have that factory measurement. Going into the truck, give you a little idea of what we're working with here. We got this yellow line. That's gonna be our first cut. We know that we don't need anything below that. And we want to leave a little bit of something to work with. You know, you can't get any material that you cut back. So our first cut, it's conservative. Down in this area right here, along here, you want to be real careful. The pans, when they come from LMC, they kind of have like a little bit of a wave. So what I did was I trimmed it down to flush. You know, you straighten it out, and then that's how you're going to find this. So when you cut this right here, be very careful because the edge of the pans They're not that great, like I said earlier. The matching up over here, if you're using LMC pans, the factory pans have an angle that cuts down like this, and the spot welds are underneath of the truck and they go in like this. Well, LMC's pans do not have that, so you'll have to create that if it's missing. It was on the other side, and I can explain how I did that. The bottom of the cab post has a big hole in it here. And also this right here poses a huge problem because it's actually the interior. It's not part of the post that you can buy. Fortunately on this truck, the rockers were really good shape. So we're not gonna replace those. We're gonna leave all these. Except for the cab corners. The cab corners both had holes. We also got some other random holes inside the cab that we're gonna fix. These were all covered with metal screen. As you can see, there's some remnants with Bondo on top. So they rivet the metal screen and then slather Bondo on it. Over here you can see some of the repairs that we got done. We came in and we replaced that panel down there on the bottom corner, and we ran the top of our floor pan all the way across, and it looks pretty decent. So that's what we're doing over here. So there you go. We got the floor pan hole cut out. Basically, as you've seen, I had a rough mark with the yellow crayon. You basically, anything that curves in to where the floor pan is going to sit, you need to get out of the way so you can get it to sit down in here and get a good mark. That's why that first mark was so rough. I slid the pan in, and you think about what material you're gonna need to keep, and you know that anything past that curve is clearly gonna be in the way, and that's how you're gonna get it to sit down in there. But it's pretty rough across the top still as well. We'll clean that up. The first thing that you do though is you grab your floor pan and you decide where you're gonna put that sheet metal screw. So we got our pan, put it in here, and you decide where to locate this thing. So you want to get it pushed down as far as possible. It really gets hung up back here though, so a lot of times what I was doing is you're gonna kind of Alright, so it's pressed down in there, but here's the problem, is what I was talking about earlier, is this portion of the floor pan doesn't meet up. And I'll grab the camera and I'll show you what it looks like when you do that. See, there's this huge gap here. It just doesn't fit to where the floor pan's. So yeah, you can push that thing down in there, run you some sheet metal screws if that's what you want to do. And that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to fit this thing right. Basically, what I did on the other side is I took this edge and I decided that this is the edge that I want to keep true from with the edge of the original on the top of this inner rocker. So to do that, this corner is typically the corner that has to be trimmed. So you can see it's up over here, and over here it's hitting. And you know, we're back a half an inch to here. So the first part we're going to trim to even be able to set our screw so we can get that down in there is this corner right here. Now this top corner. And as you can see, the cut, like I explained earlier, the LMC floor pan is different than the factory. In this portion of the truck, I left 1 inch. On the other side, I had to completely fabricate this whole thing because it was gone. It's just sheet metal, but I just broke it over into 90 and used the same technique as they would have from the factory, which is a spot weld from the inside of the truck to the outside of the pinch weld, or to the pinch weld here, and you have to create this flange. On this side, there's quite a bit more material left, and I'd like to leave it, but we'll see where we go and what it looks like once we get this lower post removed. We'll be able to see what kind of extensive damage is down in this area and see if we need to replace that panel as well, which I do want to replace some of it because I don't like this rust hole that's left right here. You know, the hole that this corner created, it also got into the inner cab panel, which you'll never be able to cover that up. You know, you'll never be able to have a nice clean seam come down on that. Also, you can see that we have, you know, the top edge of the inner fender, or the inner rocker is gone. And so on the other side, it was like this as well. And I took my grinder, and I'll document this, and we'll come down right in front of this, or right at this seam all the way up, and we'll remove all this material, and we'll get some new stuff in there to adhere our floor pans to. So the first thing we're going to do is keep So you can see the floor pan is roughed in. We just used 10 snips to get it to a rough shape, close to where we need it to be, and the orientation that we want it to be in. When you get it from LMC, it's not exactly square. I like to kind of make this edge here, make sure that it stays flush aligned with the original overlap that you'll see when you get down here. The floor pan is spot welded onto the inner rocker panel, and so I trim this edge to match that edge, and then get it pretty close on this back corner, all along this edge. And up in the corner here, you can see we have our screw. That locates us every time we put that sheet metal screw in there, and so every time that we make an adjustment, it's centralized in that location. I left a little fat right here because this panel right here is actually going to get cut out, and so in this part we're going to stop what we're doing here on the floor pan, and we're going to come back out here, and we're going to take this lower post off, and we have a patch panel that we got from LMC, and we're going to get that thing cut off because this piece of metal right here is deteriorated. There's a huge chunk right here, and you'll never get it to look clean if you don't come in here and cut this out. See how we have this hole? It's supposed to come down like this. All right, and you can also see on this seam, I went ahead and took the grinder and I cut flush with this, because all of this stuff was deteriorated really bad. So we're gonna go in there, we're gonna repair those things, and then we'll come back to the floor pans once we get that all fixed up.